In Summary Task 3, you'll analyze system connectivity and create a service area. First, you'll create map topology and reconfigure intersecting route stops. Next, you'll create geodatabase topology and fix routes and stops as needed. You'll then clean up your project map and layers. And then you'll perform a service area analysis, and then you'll enrich that service area with worker and resident populations. Back in ArcGIS Pro, this is a good time to back up your project so that if you lose your work, you can always restart it where you left off. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Windows File Explorer. And in Windows File Explorer, I'm going to browse to my PC. Now, normally I back up on my C drive for like interim backups, but this is a bigger backup. So I'm going to do a cloud backup on Google Drive. So I first need to browse to my course folder on my local drive, which is on my laptop under projects. And there you'll find my Austin Streetcar project folder and the ACC backup folder where I do my local backups. But if I lose my laptop, I won't be able to recreate my work. So I'm going to go ahead and right click the Austin Streetcar project folder and select copy. And then now I'm going to go to my cloud Google Drive and I'm going to browse to my course folder there. And then under projects, you can see there's my election dashboard project. I need to create a backup folder. So I'm going to right click in the white space and select new folder. And I'm going to name the folder backup. And then I'm going to drill down in the backup folder. And now I'm ready to paste the backup of my Austin Streetcar project. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it in there. And there you can see it's syncing with the cloud. I want to go ahead and date it so I know exactly the date I backed it up in the title of the folder. So underscore 2024-06-07. And there my cloud backup is now complete. So if I lose my work or lose my laptop, I can always go back and start at this point, which is the beginning of Summary Task 3. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close Windows File Explorer. Now we're ready to create map topology and reconfigure intersecting route stops. Since we'll be editing routes and stops in an edit session, we need to go ahead and set up our edit session under List by Selection. I want to make sure that only stops are selectable. So I'm going to uncheck routes. Under List by Editing, I'm going to make sure that both stops and routes are enabled or checked. And then under List by Snapping, again, I'm going to make sure that both stops and routes are snappable. I'm going to go ahead and reset my contents pane to List by Drawing Order, activate the Edit ribbon, and then under Snapping, in the Snapping dropdown, I want to make sure that snapping is enabled and that I can snap to points, I can snap to edges, and I can snap to intersections. Now that I have my snapping configured, I'm ready to turn on my map topology, and I can do that under the Manage Edits group in the Topology dropdown. I'm going to click on the dropdown and select Map Topology, which enables a temporary topology that only exists within this edit session and within the extent of the map view. Now I can use that map topology to ensure that I have coincident stops at intersecting routes. For example, if I'm traveling from west to east on the green route and at the intersection of the blue route, I can get off at the green stop, get on the blue stop, and then traverse north. And so if I zoom in on those intersecting routes, you'll see there is the green stop. And right now, if I get off on the green stop, I have to walk over to the blue stop and then start my journey north. Instead, I want the stops to be coincident with the intersecting routes. And so I can use map topology to do that. So let's begin editing. In this case, we're not going to create new features. We're going to be moving features around. So I'm going to activate the edit ribbon, and in the tools group, I'm going to click on the move tool. And that's going to open up the modify features move pane where I first need to select a stop. So I'm going to select the green stop. And then on the toolbar, the construction toolbar there, you can see I've got it set to move, but I also want to make sure that stretch topology is disabled. Okay, so that's enabled. I want to make sure it's disabled. That way it's only stretching the segments that are intersecting that particular stop. And so if I select and move that stop, you can see I'm stretching the green line there. What I want to do is move the green stop to be coincident with the intersection of the green and blue routes. And so I'm using snapping to do that. There it is on the intersection. I'm going to release it. And then I'm going to click on the Finish Sketch button. And that has moved my green stop to the intersection. I'm going to do the same thing for my blue stop. Again, select and move the blue stop, and then move it over the green stop. Make sure it snaps to the point. It does. And then I'm going to release and then click the Finish Sketch button. All right, so now my green stop is coincident with my blue stop, which both are coincident with the intersection. I'm going to go ahead and clear my selection and save my edits. Now you can test to make sure that it actually intersects by using the select button and clicking on it. And if they're coincident, you'll get the little pop-up window that then allows you to pick which selection. In this case, blue stop 34 or green stop 49, which means they are coincident. I'm going to go ahead and clear my selection. Now I'm ready to fix another intersection. So I'm going to zoom out and zoom in on the intersection of my green and red routes. There you can see my two stops that I need to move to the intersecting routes. So I'm going to select my green, click on Move, make sure that Stretch is disabled, and then snap the green stop to the intersection, and then do the same for the red stop. All right, I'm going to clear my selection, click on it again to make sure that the stops are coincident. They are. So I'm going to go ahead and clear it, click Save, and hit Yes. Now I'm going to fix another intersection. In this case, I am not going to use map topology because it's going to work against me, and I'll show you why. This is the intersection of the blue and the red route. And you can see the blue has a curve in there, and sometimes topology can kind of mess things up. And so if I select the blue and I leave topology on, you can see it kind of does something wonky there. And so rather than mess with map topology here, I'm going to go ahead and discard my edits. And up in the Manage Edits group, I'm going to turn topology off, so no topology. And then now I can select and move the blue stop without it stretching my route. And now I'm just going to move it over to the intersection and place it there and do the same for the red. So again, no topology. So I'm going to move the red stop. And if I just kind of move it over here over the building, you'll see it doesn't stretch the route with it. Now I'm just going to move it again to the red stop and the intersection, clear my selection, and save my edits. All right, so now I want you to finish editing the intersecting routes to make sure that your stops are coincident. I'm going to go ahead and advance the video. At this point, we've used temporary map topology to ensure that our intersecting routes have coincident stops. Now we use a persistent geodatabase topology to make sure that all of our stops are snapped to our routes, all of our routes end in a stop, and that our stops are disjoint. So I'm going to close the Modify Features pane, and in the Catalog pane, I'm going to browse down to my System Feature Dataset in my Project Geodatabase and right-click on my System Feature Dataset and select New and Topology. That's going to open up the Create Topology wizard where I can define, add rules, and summarize. For define, I'm just going to leave the defaults for the name and the cluster tolerance. And then for the feature classes, I want to check both routes and stops because they're both going to participate in this geodatabase topology. Click Next. Now I'm going to add my rules. And so the first rule, I'm going to click here to add a new rule, is going to be stops. And then the rule is must be covered by point line. And then for feature class 2, the line is going to be routes. I'm going to click here to add a new rule. This time it's going to be routes. Endpoint must be covered by line point. And then the feature class 2, which is going to be a point feature class, is stops. My last rule is going to be that stops must be disjoint, which means they are not going to be coincident, but we'll resolve the intersecting routes and the coincident points as we get to that particular rule. All right, so there we've got our rules entered. Now we're ready to proceed to the summary page and make sure that we have our topology set up the way that we want. So I'm going to click Next. And there in the summary page, I can see my name, my cluster tolerance, there are my participating feature classes, and there are my rules. All right, if the topology is set up the way that you need, go ahead and click Finish to create your geodatabase topology. And so if you look over in the catalog pane, expand the system feature dataset, you'll see if I refresh my system feature dataset, your newly created system topology. Now, geodatabase topology is very flexible and it can be easily updated. If I right click on the geodatabase system topology and select properties, in the topology properties window, I can update the general parameters. I can add or subtract feature classes that are participating, update my rules. I can also see the errors. If I click generate summary, notice that there's no errors, and that's because my topology hasn't been validated yet. I can see that under general status, it says not validated, which means that my topology rules have not been compared against my geometry yet. So I'm going to click OK, right click on system topology and go to validate. And then now if I right click on system topology and return to the properties, you'll see in the general panel under status there, it says validated errors exist. And so now if I go to my errors and click generate summary, I'll see that each of my rules has errors associated with them with a total of 7 errors that need to be resolved. And so now what I need to do is to use the knowledge of my topological errors to go in and fix the underlying geometry. And so we'll do that by first closing the topology properties window. And then now I'm going to select and drag my system topology and drop it on my map view, which is going to add it to the contents pane. There you can see my system topology group layer that includes my point errors, my line errors, and my polygon errors. I only have point errors in this particular case. And you can see those point errors highlighted in the map view as well. Now I'm going to open an edit session by activating the edit ribbon and then under topology, switch to system topology or my geodatabase topology. And then I'm going to turn on the error inspector by clicking error inspector. And that opens up the error inspector view, which is basically an itemized list of all of the errors that are identified in my geometric network. So if I zoom in, notice that I go from 7 to 3 errors because I have it set on map extent. If I disable map extent, it shows me all 7 errors. If I enable it again, then you'll see it only shows me the errors that occur within the map extent. So I have to zoom all the way out and get all of my data in the map extent to see all 7 errors if I have map extent enabled. Now I'm ready to start addressing individual errors, and all routes must begin and end in a stop. So I can see that green route has an error associated with it. And if I look down in my list of errors in the error inspector, I can find an error that says endpoint must be covered by. And so if I select it, you can see it selects that particular location. And if I right click on the error and say zoom to, it zooms down to that location. I'm going to go ahead and continue zooming all the way down. And there you can see the end of my green route does not have a stop, so I can't get off at the end. Down in the error inspector over on the right side, you can see a preview. Then I can click on the details panel to see the actual participating features that are causing the error. And then I can switch over to the fix panel to see if there is an automated fix that's enabled or if I want to mark this error as an exception. In this case, the automated fix is what I want to create a feature, a stop at this location. So I click that and that creates a stop. Now I can't tell if it's a red, green, or blue stop, and that's because I haven't coded the line value yet. So it's listed as all other values or symbolized as all other values. So if I go to the Explore button and click on that new stop, you can see the stop ID and line values are null. So I'm going to go over to the Edit ribbon and activate my Attributes view so I can update my values. And so notice the attributes, there's a error because it's breaking my contingent value rule. So I need to switch the phase to expanded. It's still not resolving the error. So now I need to switch the line to green, which is one of my expanded routes. And if I clear my selection, you can see it's now symbolized as a green stop. I'm going to go ahead and save my edits and then validate to make sure that I've actually resolved the error. And you can see the error isn't there. So I have actually resolved that error. I only have 6 errors left to resolve. So if I zoom all the way out, you can see there the 6 errors that I have left to resolve. So let's fix another error. This time, let's fix the must be covered by line. So I'm going to select that error to see where it is in my map view, right click the error and zoom to it. And then if I zoom down on that error all the way, you'll see, oh, it is not snapped to my route. So I'm going to go over to the predefined fixes, but there's not a predefined fix. I can also use the error inspector and click on it to see, but again, it says no fix available. So I'm going to have to fix this just by editing the actual geometry. In this case, I want to slide the stop over and snap it to the route. So I'm going to select the stop. Oh, but I've got some coincident geometry there. The errors are selectable too. So I'm going to clear my selection and go over to my contents list by selection and disable all the topology so I can only select the stops. So let me select again. There, it's select the stop. Now I'm ready to move the stop. So I'm going to click on the move tool and move it over till it snaps to the route. All right, so there I zoom out, it's coincident, but when I zoom back in, notice that the error still shows up there. If I clear my selection, I can see my red stop and I can also see the error. But if I go down to the error inspector and click validate, then it checks the error against the data again. I fixed it, so it clears the error. I'm gonna go ahead and save my edits. All right, so I still have some errors to resolve. If I zoom back out, I can see I have some must be disjoint errors, and these occur where I have intersecting routes. I have coincident stops. The stops are not disjoint. So if I select that stop, you can see they're coincident, which in this case is not an error. I want to mark it as an exception. So if I select that error in the error inspector and then go over to the automated fix, I can see that I can mark it as an exception, and that will mark the value as an exception. So I click it and it marks that error as an exception. And so if I clear my selection, you'll see that it now is no longer a red error. It's a green exception. And if I validate, it doesn't go away, but it still is marked as an exception. Now let's go ahead and address another error. In this case, where the green and the red routes intersect. I'm going to go ahead and select it. This time, I'm not going to fix it in the panel over there. I'm just going to right click the error in the error inspector. And then over in the fixes, I'm going to say mark as an exception. Go ahead and clear my selection. Now I want to show you one more way that you can mark an error as an exception. I'm going to zoom in again on the other intersection of my green and red routes. This time I'm going to use the error inspector tool and click on that and then click on the actual error, and that's going to give me any automated fixes, including marking as an exception, and there it marked it. Now I'm going to go ahead and advance the video. I want you to continue resolving all of your errors and make sure that you save your edits, and I'll see you on the flip side. All right, at this point, I've resolved all of my geodatabase topology errors, and I can see that reflected in the map view, where the only point errors are symbolized as green exception. I can also see it in the error inspector table view, where all of my errors are listed as an exception. And if I click validate just to confirm, I can see I've got 5 exceptions, and that occurs at the 5 intersections of my routes where I have coincident stops, which I want, so I mark those as an exception. I'm going to go ahead and on the edit ribbon, click save to save any edits to my underlying geometry, and close the error inspector view and the modify features pane. And now back in the catalog pane, I'm going to right click on system topology and validate my geodatabase topology again, just to make sure that I've resolved all my errors. So I'm going to right click again, go to properties, and under general, you can see the status is validated errors exist. And if I generate an error summary, I can see I've got 5 must be disjoint errors that are marked as exceptions, which is correct because those are the places where my routes intersect. And that's exactly how your instructor will check your topology. So make sure you resolve all your errors as needed. Go ahead and click OK. I'm I'm going to save MarkJS Pro project.